The name of the town is St. Thomas, and it used to sit under 300 feet of water. That's not the part that matters. The part that matters is that the emergency exposure protocol we follow when the town surfaces was written by a ranger who worked my shift 23 years ago, and one of those rules, the seventh one, is in my handwriting. I want to say that clearly, the way I would say it in a report, because I have spent the last 6 weeks trying to say it any other way and failing. My name is on a rule I did not write. My handwriting is on a document I have never signed. I can prove it by the way I make my fours. I close the top. Nobody else on my unit closes the top of a 4. It is mine. It has always been mine. And it is there, on a protocol sheet from August of 2002, written 4 years before I was old enough to apply for a seasonal ranger position. Let me back up and do this the way I was trained to, because otherwise I'm going to lose the thread again. I lose the thread a lot now. That's part of the problem. I am a seasonal ranger with the National Park Service, stationed at the Lake Mead National Recreation Area. My primary assignment for the last 2 seasons has been the patrol and monitoring of the St. Thomas site, which is what we call a historical exposure. You may have heard of it. St. Thomas was a small Mormon settlement founded in 1865 on the banks of the Muddy River. When Hoover Dam was completed and Lake Mead filled, the entire town went under. The residents had been bought out and relocated. The last man to leave, a fellow named Hugh Lord, did so by rowboat in 1938 while his house was being swallowed. For most of my life, St. Thomas was at the bottom of a very large lake. Then the drought came. The water dropped and kept dropping, and around the early 2000s, the foundations began to surface. In 2002, the town was fully exposed for the first time in decades. It went back under, partially, and then in the years since the water has kept retreating until the whole site sits in open desert, ringed by what used to be shoreline, a good 2 miles from the current water line. You can drive out there on a graded dirt road and walk between cracked concrete foundations. The slab of the old ice cream parlor, the base of the schoolhouse, the cistern rings, the leftover stumps of cottonwoods that died 100 years ago and kept standing because the water preserved them. It is one of the more photogenic historical sites in the West, and we get tourists, not crowds. The road is long and the heat is a deterrent. Maybe 15 visitors on a busy day, 2 or 3 on most days. 0 when summer hits. My job is to patrol the site on a rotating schedule, maintain visitor safety, document structural changes, file a daily activity report. I am not armed. I carry water, a radio, a first aid kit, a clipboard, and a small digital camera for documentation. I wear the standard gray NPS shirt, green pants, and the flat hat we all call the Stetson, even though it technically isn't one. This is the part where I should explain what I noticed, but the rules don't tell you what to notice. The rules only tell you what to do when you notice something. That's the first thing that's wrong about the rules, and I didn't understand it for most of the season. The protocol document for the St. Thomas exposure is a 3-page laminated packet that lives in a metal case in the ranger station at Overton. It's not in the official NPS manual. It's categorized internally as a site-specific observational supplement, which is bureaucratic language for a document that exists but doesn't officially exist. I was handed the packet on my first day by a senior ranger named Marquez, who told me, without looking at me, to read it until I had it memorized, to follow it exactly, and to never ask about who wrote it. I asked who wrote it anyway. He said, "People who were here before." Then he went back to his paperwork. I want to tell you, up front, that I am not someone who believes in things. I believe in paperwork. I believe in chain of command. I believe that if a system of rules exists in a federal agency, it exists because somebody at some point made a mistake that had to be written down. That was the posture I brought to the packet. I thought I understood it. I didn't. And I think now that was the posture that made it easy for the town to learn me. The first time I understood the rules were not what I thought they were was in early June. I was doing a mid-shift patrol and I had just completed the standard radio check-in with dispatch. You do a check every hour. Your vehicle GPS already pings, but you also call in for redundancy. I called in at 11 o'clock on the dot. A standard 1301 on site, no contact, all clear. My unit number is 1301, dispatch acknowledged. I put the radio back on my belt, and then I noticed something, a small one. The kind of thing that should not have stayed in my head as long as it did. One of the rules in the packet reads, do not transmit hourly check-ins on the hour. Stagger each transmission to 47 minutes past, plus or minus 4 minutes. That's Rule 3. I hadn't followed it. In my training, Marquez had explained that the stagger was about radio traffic on the national repeater, and I had nodded because that made procedural sense. Standing there in the heat with the radio still warm from my hand, I realized Rule 3 is not consistent with any other check-in protocol on any other site in the recreation area. Everywhere else we call in on the hour. Only at St. Thomas are we told not to. And the repeater congestion reason I'd been given was a lie. The national repeater is nowhere near its capacity out here. You could broadcast a symphony on it and nobody would notice. So the rule was real, and the reason for the rule was false. I stood there for probably a full minute trying to fit those two facts into the same sentence. And while I stood there, I heard something I couldn't account for. It came from the direction of the old schoolhouse foundation, which is about 400 yards south of where I was standing. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, it was a fragment, the way sound is when it comes through a bad radio, a clipped syllable, and then the trailing end of a word. It could have been the word clear, it could have been the word here, it could have been nothing. I told myself it was nothing. But I noted in the part of my brain that notes things, that there was nothing between me and the schoolhouse for that sound to bounce off. The ground was flat. The nearest structure, taller than my waist, was me. I walked toward the schoolhouse because that's what I was trained to do. Investigate the anomaly, document, report. I got within about 30 yards of it before I stopped. And I didn't stop because I was scared. I stopped because my boots made a sound on the cracked soil that was wrong. It was a crisp sound. The kind of sound a boot makes on dry, undisturbed earth. And I wasn't walking on dry, undisturbed earth. I was walking on the same track I had used every day for 2 months. It should have been soft. It was not. I knelt down and pressed my hand against the ground. The surface layer was fresh, freshly dried. There was a thin, faint impression of a boot print next to my hand, and it was mine, and it was not from today. It was from the day before, but the soil around it was as clean as the soil 10 feet off the path. The print had been preserved the way the cottonwood stumps were preserved when the lake was still covering them. Like the air itself had kept it from aging. I didn't have a category for that. I noted it in my head and wrote down path surface anomaly on my clipboard. Then I stood up and kept walking. I did not go all the way to the schoolhouse. I turned at the 60-yard mark and looped back to the truck. My route did not require me to reach the schoolhouse that day. The rules I was given did not say to complete the loop. They said to follow the patrol pattern as assigned. I was following the pattern. If the pattern ended 60 yards short of the schoolhouse, Then the pattern ended 60 yards short of the schoolhouse. I told myself that then. I don't believe it now. When I got back to the truck, I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, and I read the packet again. I had read it probably 40 times at that point. 5 rules on the first page. 2 more on the second. A long list of reporting codes on the third. The rules aren't numbered in the official packet, but I had numbered them in my own head for memorization. Rule 1. Count the foundations as you enter the site from the south road. The count should be 47. If the count is 46, continue your patrol and note it. If the count is 48, do not enter the site. Leave and report from the Overton station. Rule 2. Do not stop in the shade of any ruin between the hours of 1 and 3 in the afternoon. Rule 3. Do not transmit hourly check-ins on the hour. Stagger to 47 minutes past. Rule 4. If you encounter a visitor who is not recorded in the vehicle log at the trailhead, complete your contact without photographing them. Photograph only the foundation they are standing near. Rule 5. Do not remove your hat while walking past the Hannig ice cream parlor slab. Rule 6. When completing your daily activity report at end of shift, write your unit number first. Enter your name on the signature line last, after every other field is complete. Rule 7. If, at any point during your shift, you encounter another ranger at the site who is not on the posted schedule, do not approach. Acknowledge from a distance of no less than 200 yards. Radio dispatch for verification before any contact. If dispatch cannot verify, withdraw and do not return to the site until the following shift. I kept trying to find a rule that wasn't about me. There wasn't one. That was the shape of it, not a flash of insight, just the slow sinking sorting of items into the only box they fit. Rule 1 was about where I walked. Rule 2 was about where I rested. Rule 3 was about when I spoke. I looked out across the foundations. Nothing had moved. The light on the concrete was flat and white, and a single dust devil was collapsing somewhere near the cisterns, the way they do, the way they always do. The smell hit again, stronger this time. Pond water through the open door of a truck parked in open desert at 11 in the morning. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the clipboard to keep my hand still, and I kept reading. Rule 4 was about what I pointed a lens at. Rule 5 was about my hat, which was on my head. Rule 6 was about the order my hand moved across a page. Rule 7 was about what I would do if I met myself. I adjusted my hat without meaning to. The brim was warmer on one side than the other. I looked out across the foundations again, at the low lines of concrete sitting in the sun, and I tried to find something out there that the rules weren't describing. I couldn't. I said it out loud then, in the truck, not because I wanted to hear it, because I wanted to know if my voice would come back different. I said, "These are about me." Then I said, "These are for me." And the difference between those 2 sentences is the whole story of what happened. I folded the packet closed. The smell returned. The ruins at St. Thomas don't look the way a person would imagine. There's no town. There's the suggestion of a town. Rectangular concrete slabs sunk into the ground, ranging from the size of a kitchen to the size of a small store. Some have low walls, maybe 2 feet high, that used to be the foundations of stone or adobe houses. Some have just the outline of a wall, a ridge you can step over. The cisterns are the tallest things standing, round concrete rings about chest height, open at the top, sunk into the ground like empty wells. There are 6 of them. I have counted them. The Hannig ice cream parlor slab is in the center of the site, because it was the last commercial building before the town went under. You can still see the faint indentation of a shop floor. Nothing dramatic, just concrete. The reason you know it's the ice cream parlor is because there's an interpretive sign next to it with a black and white photo of the Hanig family standing out front in 1935. The smell out there is the thing I cannot explain to someone who has not been. It is a dry, mineral smell, like the inside of a cistern that has been empty for 100 years. Not dust. Dust has a smell, but it is a living smell. A smell with pollen and rodent and sagebrush in it. This is different. This is the smell of something that has been underwater for so long that the water has become a memory in the concrete, and the memory is slowly leaving. I started calling it the wet smell. I first caught it about 3 weeks into my patrols. I was walking past the cistern nearest to the schoolhouse, and I got a distinct whiff of still pond water, algae, soft mud, fish skin, not strong, just a note. I stopped. I looked around. The ground was bone dry. The cistern was bone dry. The nearest actual water was the Lake Mead shoreline, 2 miles east. There was no reason for my nose to be full of pond. I made a note on my clipboard. Olfactory anomaly near cistern 3. Possible organic source. I meant a dead animal. I was looking for a dead animal. I didn't find one. The wet smell came and went for the rest of the season. It was always strongest near the cisterns. It was always wrong. I wrote it up every time, and every time the explanation I offered on the report got thinner. By the 4th time, I just wrote residual lakebed moisture and stopped thinking about it, which, I realize now, is exactly what Rule 6 is about. You write your unit number first and your name last so that your mind has already closed the report by the time you commit your name to it. The rule isn't about paperwork order. The rule is about making sure your name is the last thing the town learns from you. That said, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me walk through the next few weeks the way they actually happened, because the order matters. The order is the only thing I still have. On July 9th, Marquez came to me at the station and said the patrol schedule was being modified. Instead of 1 ranger per shift, we were going to have 2 on overlapping patrols because the tourist count had ticked up slightly with the water level hitting a new low and the sight becoming more dramatic. He said I would be paired with a ranger named Delgado, whom I had met briefly. I asked why we were doubling up if the visitor count was still only in the teens. He said, because we're following the protocol for seasonal peak. I didn't know there was a seasonal peak protocol for a site with 15 visitors a day. I nodded and said, okay. I nodded a lot back then. I've been thinking about that. The next morning I drove out at 6. Delgado was supposed to follow at 6:15 in a separate truck. I parked at the south trailhead and did my foundation count. I make a habit of counting aloud, quietly, because I have a tendency to lose track if I do it silently, and Rule 1 is not a rule I wanted to get wrong. I walked the southern approach and counted. 47. I noted it on the clipboard. I checked my watch. 6:12. I looked back at the road, expecting Delgado's dust. No dust. Road was still. I stood there for a minute. Then I radioed the station, off hour, because I didn't want to wait. I said 1301 to base, confirming 1304 is en route. 1304 was Delgado's unit number. Base took a moment and then came back. 1304 rolled out at 6:15. Should be on site any minute. I said copy and stood there. At 6:17, I saw dust on the road. The truck that pulled up was the right truck. The ranger who got out was Delgado. He waved at me with the loose wrist wave he always used, walked over and said, sorry, had to stop for gas. I said no worries, and we started our coordinated patrol. But before he arrived, during the minute and a half when I was standing at the trailhead after my count, I had seen something I did not want to call a figure. It was at the far edge of the site, out by the schoolhouse. Gray shirt, green pants, a flat hat, walking with the steady, measured pace of a ranger on patrol. I watched them for probably 10 seconds. They did not turn toward me. They moved behind a low wall and did not come out the other side. I did not tell Delgado about this. I also did not report it. I want to be honest about why. I didn't report it because I was afraid it would trigger Rule 7, and Rule 7 would end my shift. I wanted to finish my shift. I wanted my paycheck. I wanted my clipboard intact. I told myself I had seen Delgado arrive early and then circle back to his truck, and I wrote that story into my own memory before I walked 20 feet toward him. That was the second mistake. The first had been not finishing the loop to the schoolhouse. I didn't see them as mistakes at the time. They felt like good judgment. That's the thing I can't stop thinking about now. Good judgment, inside a system designed to predict good judgment, is just compliance with a shape. Rule 7 says acknowledge from 200 yards. Radio dispatch. Withdraw if unverified. I didn't do any of that. I saw a ranger on site who wasn't on the schedule, and I rationalized it. Delgado and I patrolled all morning. It was routine. We contacted 2 tourists, a retired couple from Arizona, polite, curious, respectful of the ropes. We documented a new crack in the slab of what used to be the general store. We drank water. We ate lunch in the trucks, separately, because Rule 2 says no shade stopping between 1 and 3. And lunch was at 12:45, and we were both close enough to the schoolhouse slab that sitting down together felt unwise. At the end of the shift, at my usual spot in the Overton station, I sat down to fill out my daily activity report. Unit number first, per Rule 6. Date, hours, mileage, visitor contacts, 2, tourists, name and plate logged, observations, minimal. Signature at the bottom. I reached for my pen to sign. And then I read the line above the signature, which is a line I have read 1,000 times. I certify that the above is a true and accurate account of my activities during the listed shift. I did not sign it. I sat there for a long moment, because my report did not mention the ranger I had seen at the schoolhouse before Delgado arrived. And the definition of true and accurate is a definition I take seriously. I am not, by nature, a person who lies on paperwork. But if I wrote it in, I would trigger Rule 7, retroactively. And Rule 7 says withdraw and do not return to the site until the following shift. I had another shift scheduled for the next day. If I triggered Rule 7, I would be off the site for a full rotation, and Marquez would ask why, and I would have to tell him, and I wasn't ready to tell anyone about a figure I had already told myself was a trick of light. I signed my name, and in the act of signing, I noticed something I had been looking at all day without seeing it. The pen I was using was not mine. It was a standard government black ballpoint, the kind we all use. But the cap had a small bite mark on the clip, the way you bite a pen when you are thinking. I don't bite pens. I never have. Delgado did. I had noticed that at lunch. But Delgado was in his own truck at that moment, filing his own report. The pen had been in my pocket all day. I was sure of it. I had reached for it 3 times. Each time, the weight in my fingers had felt like mine. But the bite mark said otherwise. I put the pen down. I took out a different one, mine, and I initialed next to my signature in my own ink, which is a minor bureaucratic habit of mine when something feels off about a document. Then I closed my clipboard and drove home. I did not sleep well that night. I kept waking up and checking the time. I kept forgetting which pen was whose. When I did finally sleep, I dreamed about my own handwriting. The dream wasn't dramatic. I was standing in the Overton station at the desk where the protocol packet is kept, and I was reading the packet. The pages were laminated as they are in real life. The laminate had the same faint yellowing in the corners, but in the dream I could see, on Rule 7, that the handwriting of the rule was my handwriting. I noticed in the dream the way my 4s were closed, and I thought in the dream that this was wrong because I did not write this rule, and then I thought in the dream that of course I wrote it. Who else would write a rule about me? I woke up at 4 in the morning and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and told myself it was a dream. I went to work the next day, and the day after, and the day after. For almost 2 weeks, nothing happened that I could name. I finished my patrols. I filed my reports. The wet smell came and went. The handwriting I had seen in the dream faded in my head the way dreams do. Then came the Wednesday in the 3rd week of July, which is the day I am worst at explaining. I've been putting off telling you about it because everything after depends on it. But I think I have to do it now. I was alone on patrol. Delgado had been reassigned to a different site for the day, and I was back to solo rotation. The sky was clear. The temperature was 108. I did my foundation count at the south trailhead, 47. At about 11:20, I saw a family approach the site from the north trailhead, which is rare. Most visitors use the south road. The north road is rougher, and I hadn't registered a vehicle in the north log that morning. This was another small wrongness. A visitor group with no vehicle log. I pulled out my radio and called it in. Dispatch said there was no north log entry for the morning, but that I should make contact and register them at the south station on exit. I walked toward them. 2 adults, a man and a woman in their 40s, and a child, maybe 7 years old, a girl in a yellow shirt and a wide straw hat. Tourists, by all appearances. Camera around the woman's neck, water bottles, good hiking shoes. Here's where Rule 4 comes in. If you encounter a visitor who is not recorded in the vehicle log, complete your contact without photographing them. Photograph only the foundation they are standing near. I had always found that rule strange. A tourist who hiked in without driving is unusual, but not impossible. We have visitors who come in on mountain bikes occasionally and who camp at a wash down the road. I had always assumed Rule 4 was about protecting unregistered visitors from privacy violation, the kind of thing the Park Service would care about. I think now that was backwards. I approached the family, standard contact. I introduced myself, explained the site history, asked them to stay behind the ropes, mentioned the heat. They were pleasant. The father asked me questions about the Hanig family. The mother took pictures of the cistern. The little girl kept standing, specifically, next to the foundation of what used to be the schoolhouse, not on it, next to it. She would drift a few feet away, look around, then drift back. The mother asked me if I could take a picture of the 3 of them in front of a foundation so they could have a family photo. She held out her camera. I said I was happy to photograph them. But I thought about Rule 4. Photograph only the foundation they are standing near. The rule did not, technically, apply because I was being asked to use the tourist's camera, not my own. My camera was the one Rule 4 was about. I was using theirs. The rule did not, technically, cover this situation. I want you to notice how I just said that, twice. Technically. As if the word were a door I could walk through. I took the picture. I took the camera, framed the family against the wall of the old schoolhouse, and pressed the shutter. Then I took another, for safety, because one shutter press is never enough for a good photo. Then I handed the camera back. A small gust came up from behind me while she was looking at the screen. It brought the wet smell with it, stronger than I had ever smelled it, right up into my face. Pond water in open desert at noon. It lasted 2 seconds and was gone. The mother did not seem to notice. Her attention was on the little rectangle in her hands. Her face changed. She didn't say anything. She just looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at her husband. Then she lifted the camera and showed him the screen, discreetly, so the little girl would not see. I didn't, at the time, ask what was wrong. Rangers don't typically ask to see a tourist's photos. The father and mother had a brief, quiet exchange I couldn't hear. Then they thanked me again, with a politeness that had tightened in a way I recognized from my own voice when something had frightened me, and I was pretending it had not. And they began to leave, quickly. The father took the girl's hand and walked her toward the north road. The mother lingered a moment. She said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Is there another ranger out here today?" I said, "No, it's just me today." She said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." She looked at me for a long beat, and then she said, "Be careful." And she turned and caught up with her family, and they walked back up the north road and out of sight. I stood there for a while after they were gone. I didn't move. I was trying to understand, in the practical part of my head, the part that fills in forms, why she had asked me that. And the practical part kept refusing to run the number, because the number added up to something I did not want to carry. I walked back to the truck slowly. The wet smell was everywhere. On the way, I passed the cistern nearest the schoolhouse, and I noticed my own hand was trailing along the concrete rim without my having told it to. I stopped. I looked down. My palm had a smear of damp on it. Cool, clean, like water from a pipe. The cistern was empty. I had checked it that morning. I wiped my hand on my pants. I kept walking. And somewhere between the cistern and the truck, understanding caught up with me in pieces. The first piece was the voice in the rules. All of them, if you read them aloud, sounded like a ranger talking to another ranger. Not like a safety manual, like a handoff between shifts. Rule 1 told you where to count from, the southern approach, because that's the approach most rangers take on the opening patrol of the day. Rule 2 told you not to stop in the shade of ruins in the afternoon, which is exactly when a ranger would be most tempted to. Rule 4 told you about photographing unregistered visitors, which is a situation only a ranger would encounter. Rule 6 was about the way a ranger fills out a form. The second piece was worse. The rules didn't describe the site. They described the ranger. They were a portrait, written in the voice of someone who knew the job from the inside, of the person doing the job. The third piece I tried not to look at directly. If the rules were a portrait of me, then following them didn't make me safer. It made me legible. Every time I obeyed one, I was confirming a line in the drawing. I was standing inside an outline someone had traced of me, and the outline was learning where my edges were. The family had seen something in their photograph. I didn't know what, but I knew that what I had taken the photograph with was their camera, which meant Rule 4 hadn't protected me because I had found a loophole, and loopholes are the most predictable things of all. The rule knew I would look for the edge. The rule was designed around it. I sat in my truck for a long time after they left. I didn't drive after them. I didn't radio in. I didn't complete my patrol. I sat in the truck and I looked at the clipboard on the passenger seat, and I tried to remember when I had last touched it. The clipboard had been on the passenger seat all morning. I hadn't touched it since my foundation count at 8. I reached for it. I flipped it open. My daily activity report draft was on the top sheet, where I always keep it. My unit number, 1301, written at the top in my handwriting. My patrol start time, 600. And below that, in the observations section, in black ink, in handwriting I recognized as my own, was a sentence I had not written. It said, "Tourist contact 1120. 3 subjects. Do not photograph. Do not use personal camera. Do not use tourist camera. Acknowledge and disengage." That was not on the sheet when I left the truck. I had not written it. I have steady handwriting and I never use half sentences in reports. But there it was, in my hand, in my ink. I closed the clipboard. I didn't open it again that day. I radioed dispatch and I told them I was concluding my patrol early due to heat symptoms, which is a justification that doesn't trigger any other protocol. I drove back to Overton. I didn't file a report that night. I signed a blank continuation slip and told Marquez I would complete the paperwork in the morning. He nodded without looking up. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table. I made coffee I didn't drink. I kept the clipboard closed on the table in front of me, and I looked at the closed cover the way you look at a door you are not going to open. I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. Here's what I did instead. Here's what I should not have done. I went back out to the site, off shift, at 4 in the morning. I know how that sounds. I'm aware. I had been a ranger for 2 seasons. I wasn't a rookie who ran toward ghost stories. But I was also a person who had just seen her own handwriting on a clipboard she hadn't written on. And I was a person whose bureaucratic faith had a crack in it. And I wanted evidence. I wanted a classification that fit. I drove the South Road with my headlights off for the last half mile because I didn't want to announce myself. I parked at the trailhead and got out and stood in the dark and listened. The desert at night is loud with nothing. Wind, insects, the distant drop of a temperature shift in the rocks. No human sound, no human smell. And the wet smell was everywhere. Thick. So thick I could taste it. I turned on my headlamp. The red filter, not the white, because I am a ranger and I know about preserving night vision. I walked the southern approach. I counted the foundations because you do not count when you are at St. Thomas, even off shift. 47. I want to say that again. 47, the right number. I walked to the Hannig ice cream parlor slab. I had decided, in the truck, that I was going to test something. The rule about the hat, Rule 5. I had always assumed it was about respect, or heat management, or some minor observance whose reason had been lost. I stood at the edge of the slab, and I thought about it, and I couldn't remember ever actually lifting my hat on a patrol. Rangers don't tend to. Our hats stay on. So the rule, if it was based on observation, was a rule about a thing I never did, unless I had done it, at some point, and it had meant something. I took off my hat. I want to be careful about what I say next, because I don't fully understand it. The air didn't change. The temperature didn't drop. I didn't see anything. But the wet smell got stronger, very briefly, and then it stopped, like a faucet turning off. And in the silence that followed, I heard my own voice, clearly, for the first time, clearly, from somewhere inside the ice cream parlor slab. It said, "Do not remove your hat while walking past the Hannig ice cream parlor slab." In my voice. In the voice I read the rules in when I was memorizing them. The way you read a thing to yourself, with your own small hesitations, your own inflection, my own recording. The fragment I had told myself was nothing back in June was the same voice as this. I just hadn't wanted to hear it in June. I put my hat back on. I walked back to the truck. I did not run. I wanted to run, but I did not, because the last thing I wanted was to give the town footage of me running. I want to say that sentence again, because I am aware of how it sounds. I did not want the town to have footage of me running. I drove home. I did not go back to the site the next day. I called in sick. Marquez asked if I was all right. I said yes. I slept for 14 hours, and when I woke up, the sheet next to me was damp, and I told myself that was sweat. When I came back 2 days later, something was different at the station. It took me a minute to figure out what. The protocol packet, the laminated 3-page packet, was out on the desk. It's usually in the metal case. It had been moved. Marquez was at his own desk. He didn't look up when I came in. He was waiting for me. I know that now. I didn't know it then. He said, without preamble, read Rule 6 again. I read it. Rule 6 is the one about unit number first, name last. He said, do you follow that rule? I said yes. He said, every time. I said yes. He looked up at me. He is a man in his 50s, with a face that has seen a lot of sun. He looked at me with the same flat expression I have seen him give to tourists who have climbed over a rope. He said, then why is your name in your handwriting on the top of the July 9th sheet, above the unit number? I stared at him. July 9th was the day I had worked with Delgado, the day I had seen the figure at the schoolhouse, the day of the pen with the bite mark. He slid the sheet across the desk toward me. My name was on the top line, in my handwriting, above my unit number. I had not written my name first on a single form in my life. I said, that's not mine. He said, it's your handwriting. I said, I didn't write it. He said, I know. He said that last part very quietly. He said it the way you say a thing you've been waiting a long time to say. He said it again. I know. Then he reached into his desk drawer and he took out a manila folder, a thin one. He opened it. Inside was a photocopy of a sheet of paper with writing on it. I could see that the paper was yellowed at the edges, the way old photocopies get when the original is old. The writing on the photocopy was handwritten. The ink was faded. He slid the photocopy toward me. It was a page of rules. The rules. I recognized them. Rule 1, 47 foundations. Rule 2, no shade between 1 and 3. Rule 3, 47 minutes past. Rule 4, photograph the foundation. Rule 5, the hat. And then Rule 6 and Rule 7 in different handwriting from the first 5. I read Rule 6. When completing your daily activity report at end of shift, write your unit number first. Enter your name on the signature line last, after every other field is complete. I read Rule 7. If, at any point during your shift, you encounter another ranger at the site who is not on the posted schedule, do not approach. The handwriting of Rule 6 was not mine. The handwriting of Rule 7 was mine. I sat with that for a long time. Marquez didn't rush me. He watched me sit with it. The station was quiet. The refrigerator in the corner hummed. Somewhere outside, a truck door closed. The photocopy, he said finally, had been made in August of 2002. Originally filed by a ranger named J. Pohl, the senior ranger on the St. Thomas site, the year the town first fully exposed. The original document had been handwritten in the field by multiple rangers over a period of about 3 weeks, as the rules were derived from observation and testing. Each rule had been written by the ranger who observed the behavior it addressed. The names were on the back. Marquez turned the photocopy over. Rule 7 was signed by the ranger who had written it. The signature on Rule 7 was mine, my full name, first, middle, last, in my handwriting, with my 4 that closes at the top. I sat down in the chairs across from his desk. I put my hands on my knees because I didn't know where else to put them. Marquez said I was on the 2002 crew. I worked the Saint. Thomas exposure with Pole that August. I saw Rule 7 get written. I saw the hand that wrote it. I saw the face of the person who wrote it. He said, it was not you. I want to be clear about that. The person who wrote Rule 7 in 2002 was not you. He paused a long time. I could hear the refrigerator. I could hear the blinds moving. He said, but they looked like you, and they had your handwriting, and they signed your name. He said, I've been waiting 23 years for the person whose handwriting is on that rule to walk into this station, because I knew one day you would. I didn't know what to say to that. Marquez said, the rules aren't for your protection. They never were. The rules are a manual of behavior that the site learns from us. Every generation of Rangers contributes 1 or 2. That's why they keep growing. That's why they keep getting more specific. We write them because we think we're protecting the next Ranger. We're actually training the site. He said the fact that your handwriting was on Rule 7 before you were born means the site has been preparing for you. Specifically, for a long time. I said, why? He said, I don't know. We sat there in the station for a long time. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. I remember the way the sunlight came in through the blinds in narrow stripes across his desk. I remember the silence being the kind of silence two people share when they have both stopped pretending. Eventually I asked him what he thought I should do. He said he didn't know. He said the rules were not a protocol he could tell me to follow or not follow. He said some Rangers over the years had quit the Saint. Thomas rotation, and the site had let them go. Others had stayed. He said he had stayed because it was his job. He said he was retiring in the fall, and he said it in a way that did not sound like retirement so much as departure. I asked him what was in the photograph, the one the tourist family had taken, the one the mother had looked at and told me to be careful. He said he didn't know. But he said that the rule about photographing unregistered visitors had been written by a ranger in 2011, who had reported that tourists sometimes came to the site without a vehicle, and that photographs of those tourists, when taken by a ranger, sometimes showed a second ranger in the frame. A ranger who was not there. A ranger in gray and green and a flat hat, with a face. The ranger who wrote Rule 4 retired in 2013. She did not explain why. I went home that night. I did not drive back out to the site. I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my clipboard and I looked at the blank observation sheet I had clipped to the top that morning. I hadn't written anything on it yet. There was writing on it. In my handwriting, in my ink. Rule 8. If you read this rule, the rule has already been written. Complete your patrol. File your report. Do not take personal camera. Do not remove hat. Do not approach the ranger at the schoolhouse. Sign your name last. Do not read this rule a second time. I didn't read it a second time. I read it once and I closed the clipboard. And then I sat in my kitchen and I cried for a little while, which is not something I do. I thought I was protecting the place. I think I was teaching it how to be me. I want to tell you I'm going to quit. I want to tell you I've already quit. But the season isn't over. My contract runs through October. I could request a transfer. I could walk away. I know Rangers have. Here's the thing that keeps me from quitting. If Rule 8 is on my clipboard and Rule 8 is in my handwriting, then either I wrote it or something that has my handwriting wrote it. If I wrote it, I don't remember, and the only way to find out is to go back. If I didn't write it, then something out at St. Thomas is already writing rules in my name, and the next ranger assigned to the site will read those rules, and they will think the rules were written by someone who came before them, and they will follow the rules, and the rules will describe their behavior back to the thing at the schoolhouse, and the thing at the schoolhouse will learn them the way it learned me. The rule that surprised me isn't Rule 7. Rule 7 is the rule that destabilized me. The rule that surprised me is Rule 8, because Rule 8, as far as I can tell, is the first rule that the town wrote directly instead of letting a ranger write it for them. The town used my hand. It used my pen. It learned the format. And if the town can write a rule, then the town has learned how to be us. I have 2 shifts left before my next rotation. I'm going to drive out tomorrow at 6. I'm going to park at the South Trailhead. I'm going to do my foundation count. I'm going to walk my route. I'm going to transmit my check-in at 47 minutes past. I'm going to keep my hat on. I'm going to sign my name last. I'm going to do all of this because these are the rules. Because following the rules means the town knows what I will do. Which means it is not surprised, which means I hope that nothing new happens. I don't want to give the town a new rule, but I will also, at some point, stop. Somewhere near the Hanig slab, I will stop. I will open my clipboard. I will look at Rule 8, and I will check carefully whether Rule 8 is still written in my handwriting, or whether there is a Rule 9 under it now in a different hand. Or the same. Because if Rule 9 is in Marquez's handwriting, I will know the town has started on the next one. And if Rule 9 is in my handwriting, I will know that it is still writing me. I don't know which one I'm more afraid of. I used to think I knew what afraid of something meant. I thought it meant a feeling you have about a thing outside of you. I don't think that's what it means anymore. I think it's the shape you become after being watched long enough. The clipboard is next to me now, on the kitchen table. I'm not going to open it tonight. I'm going to sleep, if I can. But I want to tell you something about Rule 8, something I didn't tell Marquez. I didn't tell him because I didn't want to sound like a person who was already gone. Rule 8 ended with the instruction, "Do not read this rule a second time." I obeyed that instruction. I did not read it a second time. But earlier tonight, I took my clipboard off the table and carried it into the living room, and I opened it under a different light because I wanted to check the ink. I wanted to know if it was fresh or dry. I didn't read the rule, I just looked at the pen strokes, the physical ink, the way you look at a signature to see if it's a forgery. And in the corner of the page, in the margin, in a very small and precise hand that I did not see the first time, was a note. It was in my handwriting. It said, "You already read it twice. I'm going to finish my coffee. I'm going to turn the light off. I'm going to drive to work at 6. I'm going to count 47 foundations. I'm going to do my job. If you go out there and a ranger waves at you from a foundation, and they are wearing the right uniform, and they know the history, and they sound like the kind of person who would have this job, do not wave back. Do not let them take your picture. And if they introduce themselves to you, and the name they give you is mine, do not tell me about it, because I won't know what you're talking about. And I will write it down.